All right, there we go. So, and Doug, I never asked you your last name. Is it Hoyes? Is that just pronounced it that way?
Exactly right. Doug Hoyes.
Doug Hoyes. And you have been so that it's licensed insolvency trustee. That's the formal title. How long have you been doing that stuff?
We started Hoyes, Michaelis and Associates 26 years ago, and I was in the business for about 10 years before that.
Okay, so that's what, the 90s, the early 90s?
I graduated from university in 87. I spent 10 years with the big accounting firms, KPMG and PricewaterhouseCoopers. And then 1999 is like, okay, we're going out on our own. And we've been doing that, like I said, for the last 26 years.
Got it. So you were doing the same type of work when you were with PwC and KPMG?
Yeah, I started off as just an accountant, obviously, and then I qualified as a chartered business valuator and a licensed insolvency trustee. Most of my work with the big firms was doing corporate restructurings. So the company owes the bank $2 million and they're not paying. So they send me in, I do an evaluation, then maybe we get appointed receiver, liquidate the company or whatever. And when we started our own firm, I was like, well, I don't really want to spend my entire career working for the banks. And when you're doing corporate work, the project lasts for months and months and months. Whereas when you're helping individuals, which is what we do now, I get to talk to 10 different people in a day. Yeah. So that's much more fun. And as a result, I like it a lot more.
Oh, cool. I'm just thinking from being in that world. Now, I was young, but it hit our parents pretty hard, the early 90s. So from being in that world from that point until now, you've seen a lot, and you've seen a lot of these cycles, I guess, kind of come and go when your services are far more in demand and then when they're a little bit maybe less in demand during certain times. That's
exactly right. So if you draw the graph, I'll do it with my fingers here for everybody listening on Spotify. The market, the number of insolvencies filed, and I'm talking consumer insolvencies, personal bankruptcies and consumer proposals, and we can talk about what that means. They peaked in 2008, 2009, which was when the credit crisis was happening in the US. We've all watched the movie The Big Short. That's when that was all happening. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why it happened, but obviously the crash, but also a bunch of legislative changes. And then the number of insolvencies fell for like 10 years. They kind of bottomed out. And it wasn't until sort of 2016, 17, 18, 19 that they were rising again. And then we all remember what happened in 2020. Everything shut down. Courts were closed. People weren't working. So no one was getting sued. So you didn't have to go bankrupt to stop a lawsuit. So the number of personal insolvencies dropped by about 50% from 2019 into 2020, 2021, 22. And it's only been over the last couple of years that they have started to trend upward again. But we're nowhere near the levels we were in 2008. We are now pretty much over where we were in 2019. But when you figure that the population of a province like Ontario is way bigger now than it was in 2008, and yet we are still not back to the levels of personal insolvencies where we were at then.
Huh. That's interesting. And I actually have that chart that I'll pull up exactly to your numbers. This is from Edge Analytics, Ben Rabideau, who we both know. So he shares this type of stuff in his reports, which are great. And you're right, because you can see kind of how it was growing here. It doesn't go back as far back as when you were saying. But what's interesting to me, because I look at this, these are high, but you're saying the where we are now is not even as high as it was in 2008.
Right. That's exactly right. And I'm talking about absolute numbers, let alone per capita. If you adjusted it per capita, it's still quite a bit lower. But yes, when you look at the last 10 years, then yes, we're definitely at an all-time high. And I would expect that will just continue to grow. And we can talk about the reasons for that. But that's the expectation.
Yeah, there's so much there because you're right. Like what the people we talk to. So when I talk to other business owners, it's almost unanimous across the board. Everyone's feeling squeezed, and it's not just business owners; it's homeowners, it's investors, it's across the board. It's like there's very few people that I speak to that are like, "Oh, how are things going?" They're like, "Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like there's like this extra money floating around. Things are pretty good right now." Everyone is feeling squeezed. and it's not just from the higher rates before. Obviously, that impacted things, but then the cost of things as well. So, is that why you're seeing that as well? Because you're just seeing that there's, I don't know what the right term is. It's just like there's just financial strain, pretty much like it en masse across for people.
Yes, except I don't think it's 100% of people. I think there are two economies in Canada.
Okay.
There's the rich people and there's everybody else. And you can define rich however you want.
How do you define it?
Somebody who owns something.
Yeah. Asset owners.
Right. So, yeah. I mean, as you know, if you've owned a house for the last 20 years and your mortgage is paid off, you're fine. Everything's great. House prices, I mean, they've come down perhaps in recent months, but they're way higher than they've been historically. If you're a renter, no, you didn't share in that appreciation. If you've owned stocks, the stock market, okay, it's eased off a bit as well, but it's still pretty close to record highs. If you own Bitcoin, I don't know where it is this second that we're recording, but again, it's pretty close to all-time highs. So anybody who owned anything is still doing pretty well. And if you were able to own things with leverage because you were able to take advantage of low interest rates, then maybe you're doing even better. The average person, though, who didn't own a home, who didn't have a bunch of money in stocks or crypto or whatever, they're the ones who are getting hammered by inflation. So inflation obviously is a wealth transfer mechanism. It's a way to take money from the poor and give it to the rich. So the average working person goes to the grocery store and they go, hey, my groceries are 25% more expensive than they were 4 years ago. And that's if you believe Statistics Canada numbers. You might think it's gone up a lot more than that. Has your pay gone up by 25%? If it has, you're fine. If it's only gone up by 20%, you're in the hole. Whereas your real estate, your other assets are probably up more than that over a long enough period of time. So if you get into trouble, no big deal. I can sell an asset, I can refinance, I can do whatever. I've got that safety net. So when you ask the question of a person, so how you feeling? The person who has benefited from inflation is feeling pretty good. The average person who has been hammered by inflation isn't feeling good. And it's even worse because those people had to use debt to survive. So they're digging themselves deeper and deeper into the hole.
Yeah, we mapped out a number of years ago now. We mapped out the average, going back to 1969, we took the average purchase price on the Toronto Real Estate Board, and we mapped it against, we couldn't get the Toronto incomes, so it's not an exact science, but it was against the average income in Canada. And we mapped out the growth on a chart, those asset prices versus incomes. And it just got wider and wider as as inflation grew and as the money supply grew. And, the middle of it, we labeled, maybe it's a little bit hyperbolic, but it's truly how we feel because we get kind of frustrated by the way the system's set up. And we labeled it the destruction of the middle class. Because to your point, it's, over the years, if you took two sets of people, if you had 100 people, 50-50, they both work the same amount of income, they get raises and all that stuff, but one of them owned assets and one of them didn't. The asset owners are finishing far further ahead. And if anyone's just saving their capital, they're falling further and further behind. It's almost like, to us, I guess this is where and Doug, I didn't share this with you before, but this is kind of why our business exists, is because we feel like that's how we try to protect ourselves as Canadians. Is we try to create an asset base with us for ourselves to then allow us some flexibility and freedom in the future to, that's where the Your Life, Your Terms comes from. And we feel the asset base is almost a necessary evil with just the way the system's structured.
Yeah, the evil is the system. The fundamental problem in Canada or the US or pretty much anywhere in the world, and an interesting survey to do of your listeners. What do you think the biggest problem is? And some people would say, well, it's immigration or it's the politicians or it's racism or sexism or heightism or whatever all the other problems are. I don't know if heightism is a problem.
It probably is now.
Probably is. But the biggest problem is our money is broken. We, not you and me, but the government can print money. And so if you or I want to actually get something, we have to go out and work for it. If I want to go eat a hamburger tonight, I have to work and earn the money to buy that hamburger. The government can just print money and go buy a hamburger with it. And so it's very easy for them to say, well, we obviously want to get reelected or elected, so here's free money. And people go, great, I'm getting free money. I'm getting my carbon check in the mail. I'm getting this, I'm getting that. What they don't realize, of course, is all that does is lead to inflation. And the problem is it doesn't happen immediately. If I was to jump through the screen right now and punch you in the face, you would feel it immediately. And you would presumably punch me back.
That's quite the visual, but okay, I'll take it. Yeah.
Whereas if I'm the government and I print a bunch of money and increase the money supply, it takes maybe 18 months to filter through to you. And it's 18 months later when the inflation rate goes up. So there was a whole bunch of money printing in 2020, but the inflation rate was close to zero. How is that possible? Well, there's a time lag. That's why. So you go out and eat a bag of chocolate chip cookies, you're going to feel great. You do that every day for a year and a half, and you'll be sick and maybe dead. I don't know. I've never tried it. That would be a good experiment to try. So there's this disjoint between what happens and how long it takes to happen. And all the problems we're talking about today, well, real estate prices are high, interest rate, whatever, they all take a long time to filter their way through. So if the day you got that government stimulus check, your groceries went up by 25%, you go, wait a minute, this is not a good thing. But because there's such a time lag, we don't see it. And so as a human being, I got to still survive. So what do? Well, I rack up my credit card, I borrow, I do whatever I can, without really understanding what the root cause of the problem is.
Why do you think? So I agree with you 100%. And it's always amazing to me that it's not spoken about more often. And I'm just curious, like, why do you think this isn't spoken? Like, do you think it's purposely tried to be, it's hidden from people? Why isn't it kind of taken up a little bit, just in a little bit more media stuff? Maybe why is this not spoken about more?
Okay, so let's talk about the media. Why does the media exist? Is it to educate people? No, they're there to sell advertising. They want you to click.
Yeah, but isn't it a clickbaity headline? Like, you could make a clickbaity headline out of that topic.
The money supply is increasing. I don't know how. Okay. Like, I don't know what the money supply is. Are you talking about M1, M2, M3, whatever? So yes, they certainly talk about inflation is up. There's all sorts of stories. Inflation is up. But of course, the clickbaity title is, it's because of corporate greed. It's because of corporate profits. It's because. Okay, yes, corporations definitely profit. That's exactly why they exist. I don't disagree with that. But to dig down to the underlying issue and say that the problem is what we've been doing in the past and that's what's causing the problems today, that's not clickbaity enough. So the media exists to get you to click so they can sell ads, or so that you subscribe to their publication. I don't blame them for that. They're business people. That's what they're supposed to do. But it does worry me that there are still people, not as many, but who will watch the news and think it's true.
Yeah, it's just hearing you say this, like we speak to very few people, especially probably in different, maybe established industries, even around finance, that will talk this way. So it's really kind of interesting for me to hear you speak like that. And it's, I guess I just almost wasn't expecting it from you, because I feel like that's a little bit deeper thinking than most people give anything, because most people are just looking, at the high level problems, and they're not peeling it back a little bit and saying, here's what the real problem is. And I think it's the problem. It's the root of many problems. And I think it really, the money supply and the way things work, like you're talking about, it really holds people down, and it makes it substantially harder for anyone to move themselves up to the ranks. So when people talk about poverty or equality and that type of stuff, I mean, this system is a system that doesn't really allow for people to easily move from one level to the next because of it. And then to me, we look at it, and we're getting a bit off topic. I'll circle back to the stuff that you focus on regularly throughout the day. But I'm just curious, because to me, I'm like, how does it get fixed if our incentive is every 4 years a politician wants to get elected? So for them to get elected, they have to make promises to people, and people are always just asking, well, what's in it for me? It's almost impossible. I think nothing's impossible, but the probability is very, very slim if a politician runs on a campaign or a platform that says, okay, guys, here's what we really have to do to fix this. We've screwed up in the past. Here's how we have to do this. We have to cut back expenses. We have to stop printing money. We have to stop overspending on ridiculous things and handing out money to things that we can't afford. We can still have social programs where we pick the good ones, and the useless ones we got to get rid of. I don't see that ever being fixed with our political system. And I'm just curious, just because, it's unusual to talk to someone, at least, in our world, that is thinking like you. I'm just curious if you've had any other thoughts around that.
Well, yeah, you're right. There is no way to fix the existing system. There just is no way, because you're exactly right. A politician has to get elected. And to get elected, you've got to get donations from enough people to get you in, which means there's got to be some, quid pro quo going on, and you got to get people to vote for you. And why would someone vote for you if you said, here's what I'm going to do? I'm going to cut what you're getting. I'm going to increase your taxes and reduce the benefits you're getting. It'll be better in the long term. It'll be better for your grandkids. No, you know what? I can't afford to eat now. I need something now. So there is no solution to it. And whoever the next guy is, I assume, will be just as bad as the old guy. Like they're all the same. It doesn't matter what color tie they're wearing. So what is the ultimate end game? Well, what happens when you as an individual gets too far into the hole? Well, you come and see me and we're talking about a proposal or a bankruptcy. And I think ultimately that's what happens to the system. It has to break. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, when it breaks, a whole lot of people get crushed. And so it would be great if we could get some leadership who could explain that and gradually ease off the gas pedal. And if we could increase our productivity to the point where we're now generating more wealth for everyone, and that wealth can then go to reduce the debt, then great, we'd be able to do it. But per capita GDP has been dropping in Canada for the last 6 quarters. We're going in the opposite direction. So it's going to take some very major changes, which I guess circles back to what you and I were talking about at the start. I can't fix the system. I'm not going to be the prime minister.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. So all I can do is look after myself. And all I advise my clients to do is look after themselves. So what can you as an individual do to survive the system? Well, number one, do everything you can to live beneath your means. Figure out a way to have income slightly higher than your expenses. That's like number one. And I don't know how you can do that. Maybe it means you got to work 2 jobs. Maybe you got to go back and live with your family. Whatever you got to do, that's step number one. And then with that positive cash flow, you got to get yourself out of debt. And then once you've got yourself out of debt, you can gradually build up your assets. And I don't mean you have to, buy a house tomorrow. I mean, you have to get to the point where you got $20. That's the secret to life. $20. You got to get $20. Because if you have $20 over and above what you need to survive, you can go to the grocery store today and you'll see that chicken's on sale, and you can invest that extra $20 in chicken and put it in your freezer. And next week when you go to the grocery store, you don't have to buy chicken. So you got another $20 extra next week. Yeah. And now you can take advantage of that other sale, and it sort of cycles and cycles and cycles. And next thing you know, you got $100. And that's how you gradually get out of it. So I think the solution will most likely be at the individual level, not the political or economy-wide level.
Got it.
Hey everyone, I wanted to quickly share my personal journey with the Rockstar Circle. I joined Rockstar when I was 23 years old because I wanted to learn how to invest in real estate, and I was looking for the right people to guide me. What I didn't expect was how much more the inner circle would give me. It's not just about investing, it's about being a part of a community that is genuinely invested in each other's success. I've learned so much here, from real estate strategies to understanding the economy, personal finance and how the whole money system works. I've gained the knowledge to build my own business, create my own assets, and leverage the biggest trends in the world. But more than that, it's the growth mindset and personal development that have transformed how I approach life and investing. Having a community of like-minded people to share wisdom, experiences, and lessons with has been invaluable. From finding tenants and growing a real estate portfolio to designing the life you want, it's been a game changer. Being part of the Inner Circle has completely changed my perspective on money and life. The insights I've gained have helped me make smarter decisions, and I'm now way more confident in my financial future. If you're ready to level up your investing, mindset, and your life, I can't recommend the Rockstar Inner Circle enough. It's not just a membership, it's an opportunity to design the life you want. Thanks for letting me share this with you, and I hope to see you in the Inner Circle soon. If you're curious to learn more, feel free to check out rockstarinnercircle.com/get started for free resources and see if it's the right fit for you. Now back to the show.
Got it. Okay. And then for the people, so like, you were talking about insolvencies and how they're increasing. I think proposals have been increasing. I think business insolvencies have been increasing. Can you maybe just explain to people the difference? Because I think a lot of people aren't exposed to the two different things that you mentioned a couple of times.
Yeah. So bankruptcy is what everyone conceptually understands. Oh, if I go bankrupt, I lose everything. And okay, let's just assume that's true. It's a little more nuanced than that. But yeah, that's basically it. So you get rid of your debt, but if you own a bunch of stuff, you lose that too. That's the idea of a bankruptcy. A consumer proposal is a specific type of insolvency only for individuals, only for people whose unsecured debt, whose debt is less than $250,000, not including the mortgage on their principal residence. So we're talking credit cards, bank loans, income taxes, payday loans, whatever. And in a consumer proposal, we negotiate a deal with the people you owe money to. So a typical proposal, maybe the person owes $60,000, credit cards, bank loans, payday loans, income taxes, whatever. And we go to the creditors and we say, look, I don't have $60,000. And for me to pay this off on my own for the next 5 years would probably cost $100,000 with all the interest you're charging. I definitely can't do that. If I was to file bankruptcy today, maybe you'd end up with $10,000 because in a bankruptcy, you lose your tax refund. You got to make some payments based on your income, whatever. So here's my proposal. I owe $60,000. If I went bankrupt, you'd get 10. I'm going to make a proposal where I give you 20. So maybe my proposal is I'll pay $300 a month for the next 5 years. That would be $18,000. That's what a proposal is. So it's an alternative to bankruptcy, and it ends up being kind of a win-win for everybody. The creditors get a little bit more than what they get in the bankruptcy, but the debtor ends up with perhaps a more reasonable monthly payment. They can avoid bankruptcy, but still get rid of a big chunk of their debt. And that's why in Canada today, somewhere around 85% of filings are consumer proposals, and only like 15% are straight up bankruptcies.
Is it easier on your credit? I'd imagine your credit's been impacted already either way because you've missed payments and you're delinquent in some ways. Is the consumer proposal a bit easier on your credit? So when you come out of it, you can rebuild a bit faster than the bankruptcy, or is it about the same?
It's a bit, but you hit the key point. You're already pooched. The horse is already out of the barn.
Yeah.
So if you're coming to see me, in most cases, your credit is already damaged or it's about to be. Now, I do get people who come to me and say, well, my credit score is 800, but I know that I've maxed out all my cards and starting next month, I'm going to start missing payments. Okay, well, then your credit is going to definitely get worse. So the way it works is a bankruptcy is coded as an R9 on your credit report. So that's the worst possible rating there is. And it stays on your credit report for either 6 or 7 years, depending on which credit bureau we're talking about, after the bankruptcy ends. So the minimum bankruptcy period in Canada is 9 months. That's if you've got no assets, no surplus income, first-time bankruptcy, very simple situation. So in that case, you'd be looking at, let's say, 9 months plus, 6 or 7 years. If you have income over the government limit, then your bankruptcy lasts for an extra year, 21 months. So you add 6 years to that, you're looking at 8 years. So the bankruptcy is going to be on your credit report 7 or 8 years, depending on your situation. A consumer proposal is coded as an R7. Okay, so that's a little bit better than an R9. Nowhere near as good as an R1, but a little bit better. And it stays on your credit report for either 6 years from when you start or 3 years from when you end, whichever is quicker. So if you're able to make a lump sum proposal, your family lends you the money or gives you the money and you pay it all off in a day, then it comes off your credit report in 3 years. Otherwise, it could be up to 6 years. So the consumer proposal does come off your credit report sooner than a bankruptcy, and it's a slightly better rating. But when you're making the decision, well, do I need to go bankrupt to do a proposal? What's it going to cost? Is always the main question. Mm-hmm. So if a bankruptcy would cost you $5,000 and a consumer proposal is going to cost you $20,000 because that's what the creditors would want, then maybe the bankruptcy is still the best option, because even though it's on your credit longer, you just saved yourself $15,000, which you can then use to be rebuilding your credit. So that's why anybody who is in a debt situation like this needs to talk to a licensed insolvency trustee, not your barber. Your barber's smart, but not your medical doctor. They don't understand any of this stuff. Not some guy on Facebook, not some credit counselor who they've got their role, but they're not licensed insolvency trustees. You got to go to the experts who can crunch these numbers and explain all those options.
Which means, by you saying that, I'm sure you've had people come to you and explain all sorts of weird and wonderful things that they've read or heard.
Yeah, there's a huge problem in Canada that are debt consultants, or what the government calls debt advisors.
Okay.
And every 5 years, the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy issues this report saying, oh, it's bad. It's really bad out there. So what these debt advisors do is they have no qualifications or anything.
Is this a private sector? These debt advisors, the private sector? Okay.
Yeah. Well, yes, the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy is the federal government.
Yeah.
But debt consultants are,
whoever wants to be one.
Yeah. You know what a pimp is? They're the private sector too, right?
Okay.
So what they do is they run these ads on Facebook and, I don't know, MySpace and AOL and wherever all the kids are today. And they say, we can settle your debts for 20 cents on the dollar. Don't go bankrupt. Don't talk to a trustee because they're going to want to make you come and talk to us. So, of course, you don't know what to do. You've never been in this situation before. So you talk to them and they're very friendly and helpful and everything. And they say, oh, yeah, no problem. We can deal with that. Send us all your information. Our fee is, $2,000, $3,000, whatever. But don't worry about that. Just take a cash advance on your credit card. Send it to us. So they get all your information. And then what they do is they send your file to a licensed insolvency trustee.
No.
And then you file a proposal, because only a licensed insolvency trustee can help you file a proposal. So what these guys are doing is charging you a fee, delaying the process by 2 or 3 months while you pull the money together to pay them, and then you end up doing a proposal anyways.
Really? I had no idea that's how that worked. That existed.
That's the scam. And so, like I say, every 5 years, the government comes out with this report. And the last report said something like, 20% of all consumer proposals in Canada are going through these unlicensed, unregulated debt advisors. And so they're trying to spread the word that this is a bad thing. But these guys spend all their money on advertising because they don't do anything else.
Wow.
And as a result, they're able to, very clearly target it, get in front of people. And so I get calls all the time from people saying, yeah, I talked to Joe and I've sent him $3,000 and I haven't heard from him in 2 months. And now my wages are about to be garnished. I said, yeah, because Joe can't do anything. He just takes your money and then disappears. So then I end up helping the person. But of course, it would have been way better if they called me 3 months ago. So that's why I'm, happy to talk to the media, go on podcasts, whatever, and explain how this works so that people can go, wait a minute, is that guy a licensed insolvency trustee? Like if you were going in for surgery on your knee, you'd probably go, I wonder if that person is a medical doctor or if they're a surgeon, or, I'm sure there's qualifications to be cutting people's knees open, right? So like you don't go to court without a lawyer who isn't an actual lawyer. And, you probably don't let the guy work on your car unless he's a Class A mechanic. Like there's,
I know. It's just when people don't know any better and you get some ads on the internet, you might think it's all the same, right?
That's the issue. And they make it look all the same. They actually talk about consumer proposals and everything. Oh yeah, that's what it is. Sure. And it's only at the very last minute when they say, oh, by the way, we're bringing in this court officer who's going to help sign the paper. What? What's going on here? And then next thing you know, you've agreed to this proposal, which may or may not be in your best interest. But then what they'll also do is they'll charge you an ongoing fee. So even though you're paying the trustee $300 a month, which is going to go to the creditors in the proposal, you're also paying them $100 a month for the next 5 years, just so, I don't know, they can hold your hand or whatever. So it's a really bad situation. That's for sure.
It sounds like the payday lenders of just kind of that, the insolvency world in some ways.
Yeah. And the government has taken action against lenders. I mean, as you probably know, and as your listeners probably know, effective January 1st, 2025, the criminal interest rate was lowered. So it used to be, well, let's call it 60%, and now it's 35%. And that's not an apples to oranges comparison because there's effective interest rate versus APR and whatnot. But it's dropped from 48% to 35% if you use an equivalent calculation. The payday loan interest rate, with a payday loan being defined, I believe, as $1,500 or less and paid off in 2 months or less, the maximum rate in Ontario in 2024, it was $15 on 100. Now the rate has been lowered to $14 on 100 across Canada. So it is now federally legislated instead of provincially regulated.
Are there, for those payday loans, do people pay additional fees on top of that interest rate and things like that when they have to go that route?
No, but $14 on 100. Let's do math here. I got a calculator. I'm going to do the math live on this show. People have never seen math like this before. Let's say you get a payday loan and you're going to pay it off in 2 weeks because that's when your next payday is. You get paid bi-weekly. So you borrow $100. You have to pay back $114 in 2 weeks. And
2 weeks. I was thinking it was an annual interest rate. Never mind. Okay.
That's the point. It's not an annual interest rate. So 2 weeks from now, you go borrow another $100 and then you pay back $100. If you do that 26 times during the year, which is what biweekly means, $14 times 26 is $364, but you only borrowed $100. So the way my brain works, that's a 364% interest rate. But unfortunately, again, when you go to the payday loan place and ask them what it's only $14 on 100. So your brain says, oh, that's 14%. No, that's 364%.
Wow. So I've always looked at those places and I just feel like, that's, and it's a necessary outlet for some people and maybe they can recover from it. But I just feel like when you get to that point and you're borrowing at those levels with the interest rates you mentioned earlier or the payday loan structure, you're now just digging a hole that it just becomes very hard to dig out of. It seems like that's
absolutely right. Yeah. And so when we look at our clients, on average, if you have a payday loan, you have 3 of them.
Oh, really? Okay.
Because I get one and I got to pay it back in 2 weeks. Well, if I didn't have the money now, how am I going to have it in 2 weeks? So
if you're short already,
if I'm already short. So what do? I go to another place, borrow from there to pay back the first one, but now my debt's gone up. So then I got to go to a third place and boom, boom, boom. And so by the time they get to me, it's very common that they've got 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different payday loans at different places. Mm. And it's even worse than that because even though we've got these federal regulations and the government's there to protect us and everything, a lot of these places exist online. You go on the internet and, you get the loan and they're not even in Canada. They're in some offshore place somewhere or whatever. So they can't sue you if you don't pay them because they're operating illegally. But most of their clients end up paying them. They're making a lot of money. So it's still a profitable business for them and no way to regulate someone who's not in the country.
Huh. Wow. Okay. What about on the proposal you mentioned? It was less than if you had less than 250K, so that would typically not involve a mortgage. How is a mortgage handled either on bankruptcy and proposal? My understanding, and I could definitely be wrong, and I don't even know if, is that if you have a mortgage involved in that with the banks, your chances of getting another mortgage in the future nosedive very hard and very fast.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different concepts here. So a mortgage obviously is a secured debt. It is secured by your property. A car loan is a secured debt. It's secured by your car. So a bankruptcy or a consumer proposal only deals with your unsecured debt.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So if you come in to see me and you've got a bunch of credit cards and things like that you need to take care of, but you also own a house. Okay, so my questions are, what's your house worth? How much is owing on the mortgage? And we'll do some math. Okay, if we were to sell your house, or if you were to sell your house and pay off the mortgage, the real estate commissions, penalties to break the mortgage, how much equity would you be left with? Now, if you and I were having this conversation 2 years ago, the answer for the typical person would be, oh, I got like $200,000 or $300,000 worth of equity because I bought my house 15 minutes ago and it's already gone up by $200,000. Right? Because that's how it was back in the old days.
They were ready to refinance. You could refinance every day. It was awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. And people did. The house was the ATM machine. I just kept
100%. Yeah.
So if you come in to see me and you've got $50,000 worth of credit card debt, but you've got $500,000 worth of equity in your house, I'm going to say, look, you're not doing a bankruptcy because I'm going to take your house. Go talk to a mortgage professional, refinance the house, or sell it and pay off your debt. What we're seeing now is real estate prices are coming down. And so if you bought the house at the peak, you might be in a position where there's little or no equity in it. So in that case, if you're going to file a proposal for your unsecured debts, you get to choose. You might say, you know what, I'm going to keep the house because I can afford the mortgage. It's just all these other debts I can't pay. So you can file your consumer proposal or even a bankruptcy and keep your house, provided there's not some massive amount of equity in it. And the lender doesn't care because all they care about is, are you making your payments? Now, what you're alluding to is, yeah, but what happens when it comes up for renewal? Well, I guess that'll be between you and the lender. Most of the time, if you're with a conventional bank, you've got, more than a 20% down payment, whatever. When it comes up for renewal, as you know, they just send you a piece of paper that says, do you want a 1 year, a 2 year, a 5 year? You click the boxes and you don't even have to requalify. You just get it. Yeah. I don't know if they still send that in the mail or not. There was a couple of months there last year where there was no mail, so I don't know how it works. But so it's the bank doesn't really care in most cases. Now, if you're switching lenders, okay, well then you got to requalify, and it's a whole bigger deal. We published something called the Hoyes-Michaelis Homeowners Bankruptcy Index. And what it shows is the percentage of our clients that owned a home at the time they filed with us.
Oh, that's interesting.
There was, I believe it was August of 2022, the number was 0. We didn't have one single homeowner filing with us because that's when the real estate market was kind of at its peak. Everybody who owned a home had made money. They could refinance, they could sell. They didn't need to come in and see me. If you go back to 2011, the number was around 1/3.
Oh, wow.
Meaning about 1/3 of my clients owned a home when they filed with me, but there wasn't much equity in it, so it didn't really matter. So if we do the math and you got $10,000 worth of equity in your home, which is what you'd lose if you went bankrupt, well, maybe we offer a consumer proposal where you pay back 20. And the banks go, okay, fine. That's more than we'd get in any other scenario. Over the last year or so, that index has been going up. Right now, we're sort of sitting in the 4, 5, 6% range. So it's still way lower than it was after the crash. So way lower than it was in 2011. But my assumption is, if you and I have this conversation 6 months from now, a year from now, into 2026, whatever, there will be an increasing number of homeowners filing insolvency because the equity has been squeezed out. They can file and still keep their home if they want to. but they can't handle their unsecured debts. Now, so the two options you've got are, well, you keep your home and you keep paying the mortgage, or you say, you know what, I can't do it. The reason I'm insolvent is because my mortgage payment was $2,000 a month and now it's $4,000 a month. I can't do it. And so if there's no equity in your house, then it's the old jingle mail thing, right? You put the keys in the envelope and send them to the bank, and there it's your house. And then when the bank sells your property, whatever the shortfall is gets included in the proposal of the bankruptcy. So we haven't seen much of that, but we will going forward.
On the real estate front, have you gotten any calls? I don't know if they would trigger calls to your offices or not, but in this world where there's closings coming up, where people are, they're underwater on what they bought for a couple of years ago. There's, specifically the influx of inventory coming in the Toronto condo market, for example. So there's going to be, you would think there's going to be some people saying, oh man, I know we've spoken to people that are like, I don't know how I'm going to close on these properties. I just got greedy. I walked into the sales office. Everything was going up. I bought 3 units. I'm like, why'd you buy 3 units? I'm like, I don't know. I just felt like I should. It was pure FOMO.
Yep.
And does that trigger call? Are you seeing some of that come up in your conversations with people?
Yes, we are. And I think I will see a lot more of it. So I talked to a guy a few weeks ago, basically exactly the scenario you just described. So this is just a guy. He's not some millionaire. He's not Warren Buffett or anything. But during the pandemic, he thought, you know what? Why don't I buy one of these condos and I can rent it out? Now, of course, what he bought was a pre-construction condo, which is a separate level of Dante's hell, I think. So in 2019 or 20 or 21, they were selling for, and I'm going to make up numbers. You need to talk to a guy like Ron Butler or somebody who actually understands this. But, they were selling for, $1,000 or $1,100 a square foot. So it was $1.1 million to buy this relatively small condo. Not built yet. Well, now here we are into 2025, and the builder calls up and says, hey, good news. The project will be finished next month. You've got to come up with the rest of the money. So you put down, let's say, $100,000 deposit. It's a $1.1 million condo. You've got to come up with another $1 million. So you phone the bank and say, hey, I need a mortgage for $1 million, please. And they start laughing and laughing and laughing because they say, well, wait a minute, that particular unit appraises out at $800,000. So the most we can give you is, I don't know, $600,000 on the mortgage or $700,000 or whatever the number is. Okay, but I need to come up with $1 million. I'm $300,000 short. Yep, that's the problem. Mm-hmm. And so we've definitely had people in that situation, but there are more and more condos that are closing in 2025 and into 2026 where that's going to be the problem. And so I think it'll be very interesting to see what happens, because there's two people who are going to lose here, the purchaser and the builder. So you're the builder, and I'm sure, Nick, you've got lots of 50-story towers in your portfolio that you're just finishing off. And so I don't know how much it costs to build a 50-story tower. I don't know, a couple $100 million or something. I don't know how much it costs. So what did you do as a builder? Well, you went out and got a loan, and the plan was I sell all these units and pay off the loan. And then I flip it into a condo corp and I'm done. I've made my money. Well, what happens if half of your purchasers can't close? You got a problem as the builder now, because you can't pay the loan. You got to carry that. Yeah. So I suspect what will happen is builders are going to go, oh my goodness, we got a problem. Maybe they can make some deals with a bank or something and say, look, can you just appraise the units at $900,000 so these people can close and get out? Because if you don't, I can't pay the loan back. This goes into receivership. Everyone loses everything. But if there's only 5 or 10% of the purchasers who can't buy it, I guess they're really screwed then. And they end up with a $300,000 loss on their $100,000 investment. Those are the people who are coming to see me. And I suspect, yes, I'll be getting more and more of those calls this year.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. What do you think about, because a lot of people will look at some of the announcements from the federal government, different mortgage changes and, what they're doing with interest rates. They're like, oh, see, they're always just trying to protect the real estate market. And I understand it does trickle down to it, not even trickles down. It immediately impacts the real estate market, but then it also trickles down to the banks, because if there was a major but going back to what we were talking about in the financial system, that we have a current structure here. If there was a major prolonged real estate crash, the banks are holding all these loans with assets that are underwater on them. And it creates an enormous amount of financial instability very quickly in the financial system. So I look at that and I'm just like, yeah, like, not that they can't let it happen, but if you look historically recently, like a lot of financial decisions I feel like are made to protect the banks. And maybe that's the underlying factor when some people look at these changes that are like, oh, well, look, they're trying to prop up the real estate market. Well, yes, they're looking at the real estate market, but I don't think they care as much about the real estate market and the mom and pop guy, the guy you talked about that walked into the office and bought a pre-construction condo. I think they're looking, to your point about, holy shit, if these things don't close, then whatever, maybe it's Bank of Montreal who did the financing for this building. And if that kind of spreads a little bit further, all of a sudden there's a little bit of kind of like rumbles in this financial system. And I know it would have to happen at a certain level, but sometimes I feel like, isn't that something that's really impacting a lot of things going on here? Is that structure there?
Yeah, I agree. And again, I'm not a banking expert, so what do I know? I mean, my gut feel is the Canadian banking system is in pretty good shape. Yeah. I don't think the big five banks have made a lot of really stupid loans and they're way out over their skis and they're going to get crushed. But yes, if it goes down enough, then that could certainly be the problem. I think the bigger people who get hammered are the little guy who can't close on the deal. They got the massive debt and they get wiped out. There would have to be a whole lot of those and a whole lot of buildings going into receivership to start impacting the banks at the big level. So yeah, I'm sure it'll impact bank profits. The Canadian banks have all been around for 150 years, so I'm not expecting them to go out of business anytime soon.
Yeah, no, yeah, I wasn't saying that. I just thought just as a
if it did get to that point, then yeah, I'm sure the government would bail them out. I mean, that's what the U.S. did in 2008. And presumably they just do the same thing again because you can't have that happening. But I don't think that's imminent. I guess we'll wait and see.
Yeah. What about, hey, if someone's a renter and they're going either through proposal, they're like, oh, shoot, I'm in trouble. Can the rent be part of, anything that they claim as a proposal or as bankruptcy?
Yeah, so you're talking about rent arrears specifically, I would assume.
I guess, yeah. If they're yes, but I guess it hasn't gone to. This would be rent arrears that have not gone to the landlord-tenant board. So let's say someone hasn't paid the rent for 4 months, and there's still going to be another 4 months before they get in front of the landlord-tenant board. Does that impact anything?
So in that scenario, yes, what you could do is file your proposal and list as a creditor the landlord for 4 months' rent. Now, there's a whole bunch of problems with that because the landlord is still going to proceed to the landlord and tenant board. And like you said, it's going to take another 4 months to get there. And by the time they get there, even if that first 4 months got wiped out in the proposal, you're another 4 months behind with them at that point. So, and how friendly is your landlord going to be if you're not paying the rent? Like, okay, I understand legally you got to go before the LTB. They can't kick you out until a bunch of stuff has happened. But I guarantee you when your toilet backs up, the landlord ain't coming to fix it. And when the roof leaks and whatever else happens. So my advice to people in those situations is the number one thing you want to do is go find another place to live. Clearly, you cannot afford to live where you're living. It doesn't appear there's any chance for you to get caught up. So you might as well cut your losses now, go back and live with family, get a roommate, find a cheaper place to live, whatever, because the proposal will not solve your rental problem.
Got it.
So you and people say, but it's such a nice place and it's rent control. I know all that. But ultimately, if you're not paying your rent, you're not going to be living there. So you would be better off moving. And I realize that's not easy. I don't have first and last month's rent. It's not easy to do. It's a very difficult situation. The only good news now is that it appears that certainly in places like the downtown core of Toronto, the really tiny condos, the rent is dropping on those.
Yeah, there's a lot of really tiny condos
you wouldn't want to live in one for the rest of your life because it's basically the size of a hotel room. But if you're looking for a place to rent, that's where the deals are right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then I'm just curious, you mentioned commonality about people that came to see you. So a couple things. So it's interesting to see how you guys track your numbers. So you had the housing index and the number of people that kind of had a property. If people had one payday loan, they would often have three. Are you seeing other commonalities of people that are like, okay, you know what? I got to either, it's time for me to seriously look into proposal or bankruptcy. I need to come see you. Is there some other things? Is it, is unemployment usually the thing that pushes people over? Is it maybe a health things that come up? And because they're like life circumstances happen to good people, like, is there stuff that you see there?
And that's exactly what it is. It's life circumstances. So a small percentage of people who become insolvent, they were just crooks or bad people or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's a very small percentage. The big reasons are loss of income. And like if you're unemployed right now today, you don't need to go bankrupt today because nobody can garnish your wages today because you don't have any. So it's typically once you get back to work, that's when you're coming to see me and that's when you're filing.
Oh, wow. So I would have never thought about it like that. Yeah.
Well, and there's two reasons for that. Number one, the purpose of insolvency, a bankruptcy or a consumer proposal is creditor protection. I need protection for my creditors. I don't want them taking me to court, suing me, getting a judgment and garnishing my wages. Well, if you don't have any wages, you don't have to worry about that. So in a lot of cases, I say, look, when you're back to work, like right now you're getting EI, you need all the money you got to be paying rent and buying groceries. Don't be paying me for a proposal. When you're back to work, okay, now you're at risk of having your wages garnished because you're working again, but you can also afford to pay for the protection. That's when we do it. So typically our business spikes after the unemployment rate starts to go down. It's not at the height of the recession that we're busy. It's after the recession ends. But back to your question, what causes insolvency? So reduction in income, which was a huge thing in 2020, 2021, and we're still dealing with the fallout of that. Medical issues. So I know in Canada, medical is free, but if I'm not working, I don't get paid. So medical issues are a significant contributor. And then the third big one would be relationship breakups.
Yeah,
You get separated, and we used to have two incomes and we were paying one rent, and now we've each got our own rent. So we had debt in the relationship. Well, now we've both had to increase our debt just to survive and move out and get new furniture and all the rest of it. That becomes a big one as well. So those would be the big three predictors of what's going to get you into financial trouble.
Okay. And I'm just interested, I'm just watching the time, so we'll wrap up. Just had a couple questions for you here. Because what you were talking about earlier, when you were talking about, asset owners versus the people that don't own assets, and you listed off some different assets. And I think one of the assets that you listed off was Bitcoin specifically. And I'm just curious as to your thoughts about that, about Bitcoin. So your personal view, I'm not holding you to anything, but you view Bitcoin as a worthy asset to consider holding at times?
Well, I don't know the future. I'm not going to give investment advice because what do I know?
Yeah, and I'm not taking it like that. Yeah.
The appeal of Bitcoin, and I use the term specifically. I'm not talking about cryptocurrency.
Okay, so just to give you context, we've talked about Bitcoin a lot. Bitcoin specifically on this show, not cryptocurrency. Same thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, because my opinion is cryptocurrency, they're all crap.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Bitcoin is different. And again, you've had guests on the show who've talked about it. I won't go into it, but it's kind of what I said earlier. You can't print Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Well, you can, but it costs like $150,000 Canadian of power to create a $150,000 coin, sort of a thing. That's what proof of work is. So if I had to guess, what is it going to look like 5 years from now? I would guess that it will be worth more in nominal dollars than it is worth today.
Yeah.
I follow the Jeff Booth school of thinking, which is that's the totally wrong way to look at it. You can't look from within the system. You're in a bubble. You can't really see it. You have to get out of the system. And that's kind of the solution to pretty much all of our problems. Like, when you're watching the news, you got to watch many different sources. If you're trying to figure out what the best food to eat, you can't just listen to one advertisement, and it's the same with money. So I think the appeal of Bitcoin is it can't be printed, and therefore it, retains its value. I think that's the basic concept. In fact, I had Jeff Booth on my podcast a couple of years ago, and I asked him, so what are you supposed to do if you're in debt and you're having problems and all the rest of it? And he said, well, look, I'm not a licensed insolvency trustee. What do I know?
That's your problem. Yeah, you deal with you.
But he said, if I had to, come up with one idea, it would be, well, every week put a little bit of money into Bitcoin. And obviously, if you had been doing that for the last many years, then you'd be doing fine. The caveat to that is, in Canadian dollars, it's very volatile. So it can, I don't know, it's 100% higher than it was a year ago or whatever the numbers are. So if you're trying to put some money aside to pay rent in 3 weeks.
Yeah, don't do it.
That seems really risky to me. But if what you're trying to do is put some money aside or preserve your wealth so that 20 years from now you can retire, that's probably a better answer. But you've got to do your own thinking on that. How are you going to store it? Where are you going to put it? You got to do the work. You got to do the work. Yeah. And it's like it's many hundreds of hours of work to understand it. If you figure out, okay, I've got to put it on a hardware wallet, and I've got to have my secret words, and I put those in a safe, and I live in California and there's wildfires and my house burns down, I've lost it. So you have to understand exactly how it works. But yes, I guess if you're looking for something that can't be printed, then that would be it.
It's funny, Tom and I, we've always been long-term, kind of just old school investors. Like we were investing in gold before, real estate, and then this kind of came across our, first we dismissed it. I guess that was almost 10 years ago, or 8 or 9 years ago now. And then we kind of looked into it further. Jeff came out to one of our events. We've had Jeff on the show a couple of times, and Jeff turned into a bit of a friend. And he came out to one of our events once, and he was giving a presentation, and the slide that he had up was basically a nuclear bomb exploding. And we're just like, oh my God, like what are people thinking right now? And the stuff he talks about, right? And we're just thinking, what's going through people's head right now as we see the picture of this nuclear bomb, and Jeff talking about what. So, but that book, his Price of Tomorrow book, there was there was just a couple things there that hit home with me that I was like, I never thought about it like that, and it just blew my mind.
And so I would suggest, as a big picture piece of advice for someone who's watching this going, okay, I don't know what you guys are talking about, I would start by reading his book, The Price of Tomorrow, which is a relatively short book, very easy to understand. And after reading that book, you should be able to understand his concept that the world should be deflationary. Why isn't it? And then Lynn Alden's book from last year, Broken Money, which is a much longer read, a much more historical background, also, brilliant. Yeah. But for all of these things, you got to commit to putting in the time.
100%.
And so listening to some dude on a podcast, and we're both brilliant people, obviously, but I said earlier that you can't, trust everything you hear in the media. You definitely can't trust anything we're saying either.
For sure.
Absolutely nothing. You should be, researching it yourself, looking at corroborating sources, doing all that sort of thing, because, that's the only way you're going to be able to figure it out. And it takes time. It's not easy.
And Doug, just to finish up here, for people that are looking for more stuff from you, you have your podcast, your book, the company. What's the best avenue for them to reach out? Is it to just go to the podcast, the book?
Yeah. Our company website is hoyes.com. So that's my last name, HOYES.com. So if you're actually in financial trouble, or you've got relatives or friends or whatever, we're throughout Ontario. Hoyes.com is the best place to find us. I'm on whatever the new name of Twitter is. And again, it's just my name, Doug Hoyes, DOUG, HOYES. And then our podcast is Debt Free in 30, which is, just like yours, Spotify, YouTube, every podcasting app, whatever. It comes out every Saturday. And what we try to do is keep it very practical. And so some of the episodes we do will be really good for someone looking for some basic financial, intelligence, literacy, whereas others might sort of go off on tangents and talk to guys like Jeff Booth. So they're whatever strikes my fancy. But yes, those would be the three men, and we're on all the social medias too.
Yeah.
But those would be the main ones.
No, I like the podcast is good though, because it's just very straight to the point and direct, and it's just interesting. Even the episodes that I listen to, if it's things that I've heard before, maybe on the finance side, the way it comes across is it's just, there's no ulterior motive. It's just like, yeah, hey, here's how things work. Take it and do what you will with it. You know what I mean? Like if it helps in some way, great. So I think that's why I kind of liked it. I'm like, yeah, these guys are just sharing what they're seeing. They're sharing the way things work. And then you figure it out, which I don't know. I liked it for that, regardless of, whatever topic level was more advanced or not, or whatever the case. So
yeah, I like it when someone contacts me and says, yeah, I've read your website. I've seen your videos on YouTube. I kind of understand it. I think here's my situation. What do you think? I like an informed consumer because I can't start BSing them because they've already done the research. They know what I'm talking about. And I think that's the best kind of consumer to be.
Awesome. Doug, I appreciate you taking the time, man. We didn't know each other, so for you to just kind of jump on board, I appreciate you doing it cold. So I thank you very much. And that's it.
Happy to do it, Nick. Thanks.